Katie Bryzick graduated in 2015. She began her fundraising career as a student caller in the Christendom Phonathon. Most recently, she was the manager of special projects and advancement for the Thomistic Institute, where she oversaw all fundraising activities and developed the existing fundraising strategy that assisted in theology. She is currently a graduate fellow with the De Nicola, am I saying that? Putting the emphasis correctly? De Nicola Center for Ethics and Culture at Notre Dame and the Thomistic Institute. So we're very happy to have you with us, Katie. We're really excited to hear from you. And then Thomas Ward, you may recognize. He graduated in 2019. He has served Christendom's benefactors in the Virginia to Massachusetts region.
Yes.
Yes.
Sometimes up to Maine.
Sometimes up to Maine.
Yep.
Region of the U.S. as a donor relations officer. His work experience includes financial services in NYC and politics in D.C. He majored in philosophy and minored in political science. So he's excited to talk to you about how you can both work and do something you love at the same time. So I'm excited to hear about that. Let's kind of get started with not the typical question of how did you get to where you are, but instead, can you define development and advancement and share with us a little bit about those words? Because we kind of put on the flyer, it's fundraising, but I would say in more technical speak, we call it development and advancement. And so is there a difference, Thomas?
Yes, I would definitely say there is, and I'd love to hear your thoughts too, Katie. I think fundraising is a word for raising money. I think development and advancement is a little bit of a higher level strategic approach to, hey, an organization, where are you going with the direction of the nonprofit usually? When you have a nonprofit, you need to raise money because you're not making money, so you have fundraising. But development, in my experience and advancement, is very much advancing the mission of the cause. It's not just raising money. Actually, the money kind of comes as a byproduct of you finding people who want to do what you're doing in your nonprofit. So I think fundraising is a little bit more, fundraising is specifically more the money in my mind, and advancement is a little higher level.
All right.
Yeah.
That's very helpful.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Katie.
Yeah, I agree with everything Thomas said. I think that the one thing that I would add, maybe as, like a fun historical note, is the Christendom Advancement Office, when I was a student worker there, was actually, at that time, kind of rebranding from being the Development Office to being the Advancement Office. So actually, the kind of the in vogue term in the industry now is advancement. So that's, just for you to know, if you're trying to get a job with something like this, it'll sound like a little bit more like you know what you're talking about if you say advancement rather than development. I mean, I don't think they'll hold that against you, but that's kind of the way that people in the field think about it. So yeah, advancement means advancing the mission. Develop came more from the kind of post-World War II idea, meaning the same thing that we mean when we talk about developing countries. It has to do with economic development. So the idea was that you're developing a specific institution economically, and then the industry has shifted more in the direction of talking about advancing the mission that you are of the organization that you work for.
Okay.
Well, can I add to that too, Katie? That I think that different fundraising shops are not made equal, right? There are fundraising shops who just go out and make money, and then there's people who it's kind of not about the money, it's about the mission. And there's a real, I don't know, sometimes so I'll mention to people, hey, I do development, advancement, fundraising. That's usually the word that people are like, oh, I know what you do. You go out and you ask people for money, of course. And it's just kind of explaining well, the way Christendom does it is very much not about the money, it's about the mission, and the money comes secondary. So I just wanted to add that on kind of as an addendum, that there's a difference in fundraising shops.
Yeah. And so so you mentioned, nonprofits are the ones that would have a development office or an advancement office or a department. So tell us a little bit more about the types. So I guess you all are representing a few different institutions, and Monica would have been representing a high school. And so what other kinds of places could we think about that our students could work in that they would be doing development and advancement?
Do you want to take
Either
that,
one.
Katie?
Sorry. Go ahead, Katie.
Wow, this is a great question. So basically anything, so nonprofit is a tax status, which means actually not that you don't make any money, or that you don't like do anything for profit, but it has to do with where the money that you make goes, basically, within the organization. And organizations, very obviously, schools. So Christendom, the school that Monica worked for, the St. Jerome Institute. I work for a nonprofit called the Thomistic Institute, which technically is a research institute within a school. So most faith-based organizations are nonprofits. Things that you would think about also, any entity within the church, basically always a nonprofit. If you work for a church, that's a nonprofit. And then the other most obvious thing is kind of political think tanks. Or, for instance, you could be doing maybe the thing that most people are familiar with if they're not from a faith background is political fundraising. So, like for campaign. I think those are kind of the major categories I can think of, and like humanitarian stuff, right? So Red Cross or other not faith-based but like humanitarian outreaches to the third world or for crisis relief or pregnancy centers or that kind of stuff. Anything basically, like if it hasn't something that you think of, go back to the events and the mission thing, like things that exist mostly for a mission and not because they are producing some tangible substance that they're selling, are often nonprofits.
Okay. Yeah. Did you have anything to add to that?
I would say it's a very broad field, too. I would say almost everything that you could do in the for-profit sector, I would argue you'll probably find maybe not a big operation, but a small fundraising operation who does it non-for-profit. So, I mean, you could make iPhones, and there could be a nonprofit to give iPhones to people in Peru. Like there's any field you want to go into, there's probably a nonprofit in it. Probably a very niche area, but odds are there is one there.
Okay. All right. So that answers that one question. Sorry, I'm looking at my questions, making sure I cover everything. So I guess, let's go back a little bit to your all's individual stories about how you got into fundraising. I can't say that a lot of people walk around and say, you know what, when I grow up, I'm going to be a fundraiser, I'm going to be a development officer. So what is it that led you to where you are, where your job currently, Thomas?
Can I actually ask you all a question? How many of you want to be your own boss in some way, to make your own schedule? How many of you truly want to believe in what you work and do what you love 40 plus hours a week? How many of you enjoy meeting new people and learning their stories and listening? Okay, like I've seen a ton of hands. I knew I loved doing all those things. I didn't think that, gosh, they're all in fundraising. It's something I never actually even really thought I would ever want to do. Never even crossed my mind until senior year at Christendom. And I would say all those three things are something, if you love doing them, you could make a great fundraiser, honestly. And you have an integrity because of the education you've had here. You have honesty. Like it's easy to do if you have those fundamentals. And
so how did you get into
so
it?
To fill in on that, I guess, so it's funny. I came to Christendom, and it's funny. I came to Christendom saying, I want to make a ton of money, which is hilarious. So I was like, well, the best way to make a ton of money is to study STEM, obviously, because I grew up in Connecticut, and everybody's like, oh, the money's in STEM. I worked as a caddy for many years, and they're like, where do you go, Christendom College? Like, what are you studying? You're not going to get a good job after that. So anyway, kind of bought into that, even though I went to Christendom. Love math. Math major's great here. But I tried calculus, and I was spending 4 hours a week in tutoring, and was like, this is not my strong suite here. What am I doing? So then I was like, well, okay, maybe I want to change the world and go big. And so I studied political science and interned on the Hill, kind of studied constitutional law with Raphael Madden. On a Wednesday night, went into New York City, or not New York City, D.C. the next day, and realized, gosh, I don't know if this is my calling. I know it's somebody's calling, but it's not my calling. I think I'm going to compromise everything I hold dear by the time I get to the top, or I'm just going to hate my life. And so then kind of senior year, coming out of Rome, it's like, gosh, I would love to just do something I love doing, make a mission impact, work in the world, somehow not be of it. And this position came up. God bless Vince Christ, he told me about it. He's like, there's some position, I think it's on the West Coast right now. Anyway, applied, was this close to doing financial consulting up in Connecticut. I think I would have hated it. And anyway, God's doors just opened, and I started at Christendom 10 days after I graduated. So that's kind of the long, short story.
Yes. I remember having a conversation with you in the
Right.
admissions office, and you were like, "Yeah, I've got this job lined up, and I've got to tell them whether or not I'm going to take it." And I said, "Did you enjoy your internship there?" And you said, I mean, it was fine.
Flat.
And I was like, "You can't go do that 40 hours a week. Like, you're going to be miserable." So I remember that, and then this
That's
came
funny.
about, and it was a much better fit for you. So
fun.
I'm so glad you pursued it.
It's very fun.
So, Katie, tell us a little bit about how you ended up in development advancement.
Yeah, so I believe it was my sophomore year at Christendom, when I actually never confirmed whether or not the Christendom Phonathon currently exists, so maybe I'm using like totally outdated, analogs here.
Does the phonathon, yep, I'm getting thumbs up. It still exists.
It does.
You're
Okay,
good.
great. So the phonathon was created when I was a sophomore, and it wasn't like a normal work study job then. It was sort of like off to the side of a somewhat different category, because it was a pilot, semester to see if it worked. I actually don't know whose idea it originally was. Maybe it was Paul Joseph's idea, but
Maybe Adam
anyway,
Wilson
We'll give
too.
him the credit.
one of the senior that I knew, she was friends with my older brother, who was a junior at Christendom at the time. And one day she approached me, and I already had another job on campus in the student life office, and she approached me and just asked me, like, we are going to start a phone bank, and we will call benefactors and ask them for money. I was like, oh, why are you telling me this? It's like, because I was told I can just choose a couple of people and then test them out, and if they work, then they can, I can have them. So if you want to start doing this, then you have to do this phone interview where you have to do a trial run with pretending I'm a benefactor and asking me for money. It's like, okay, fine, that seems fine. So it was a very harrowing experience. This is not to talk about issue working at the Phonathon, but it is it was a little anxiety-inducing the first time, because after they gave me the job, I arrived in the Phonathon, and Sarah, that's my name, Sarah hands me the phone and says, I would like you to call this man and ask him for $500. I was like, okay. And back then, I don't know if you guys use scripts now, but this was pre-script, so I didn't know what I was doing. I was just told, I was given the 3 rule. You need to ask 3 times, and they can turn you down 3 times before you stop an answer and hang up. I was like, okay, this is awesome.
Wow.
It was actually a terrible phone call. And yelled at me. But for whatever reason, I was undeterred by this, and Sarah was like, oh, that's basically probably the worst call you'll ever have, so all the calls will be easier after that. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll just stay. And then I came to really enjoy the job, because I loved Christendom more the longer I was there. I think I was really starting to realize what a gift it was by the time I was a sophomore, so it was a perfect time for me to get on the phones with benefactors, and then basically the sad days were when no one really answered, but the great days were somebody answers, and then you have sometimes a quite long conversation with them just about why they love Christendom. And the thing that is so great for them was being able to talk to somebody who, you were the reason that they donate to Christendom, right? So for them, it's the best thing. It's the best thing for a benefactor to be able to see that their gift makes an impact, right? And you would impact. The fact that Christendom is a great thing for you, is turning you into a very intelligent, well-educated, and actually quite highly skilled by the time you're 21 or 22 and graduating from Christendom, compared to everybody else in the United States just graduating.
So true. Yeah.
That's what they're paying for. You're the product. So I did that, and then I ended up being a Phonathon manager when I was a senior. had sort of an interesting hiatus from fundraising life. But I guess I did have to fundraise to get there to do a mission year right after I graduated. And then the year after that, I was like, okay, I want to serve the church. I don't think it's to be a missionary. I want to be part of something that is focused on evangelization. And these are the skills that I have. And actually the way that I got the job was that two of my best friends from Christendom moved to DC right after graduating. I wanted to move in with them, so I didn't even have a plan of like moving someplace for a job. I decided I was going to move to DC because I wanted to be with my friends, and I like Christendom taught me that friendship matters, and so I'm going to prioritize these relationships. I'll be able to find a job in DC. And right before when I was trying to move, they had happened to move in next door to the Dominican House of Studies, which is where the Domestic Institute is located. And they happened to befriend the priests who were the director and assistant director of the Domestic Institute, completely unintentionally. And it just so happened that Father Dominic, the assistant director at the time, was talking to my friends, Bernadette and Melody, one day after Compline. They like ran into him outside of the chapel. It's like, man, we just really want somebody who loves the faith and loves Thomas Aquinas and has some fundraising experience. And that's it. That's all we want. And they were like, is this the moment where we say that okay, you should hire our friend Katie.
Wow.
So he interviewed me the next day, and 3 days later they offered me the job.
Wow, that's incredible.
Sweet.
The power of networking, everybody. We tell you that word and nobody loves it. We're like, that's just the weird thing that people have to do out there, but it actually works. And
Because you helped them and they helped you. It's everybody's helping each other. It's not a take, you know? That's why it works so well. It's beautiful.
And I think it's, especially with your example, it's important that your friends knew who you were. They knew what you were about. And so I think you all have to share your interests and your passions and desires with your friends so that they can help set you up in these kinds of instances. So, wonderful. Okay, so tell us a little bit about your kind of day-to-day, because I assume it's pretty different between the two of you. And Katie, if you can share maybe about how you grew, I don't even remember how to say it, you increased the revenue by 500%. So tell us a little bit more about the day-to-day work that goes into that.
Yeah. So when I started the Domestic Institute, basically we had a mostly major gift focused fundraising strategy. So the rest of it wasn't really, the rest of the fundraising strategy wasn't really organized. And from my experience, especially working in Phonathon and from my relationship, my kind of like mentee relationship with Paul Jalsevek, knew actually a lot more than I realized I knew, but quite a lot about fundraising, way more actually. This is another thing that was great for me walking in, was I was like, okay, I'm 23, I know what I'm talking about. You are 45, you're a priest, I'm just gonna listen quietly. And after 2 days, I was like, let me know what you're doing. I think I'm gonna take over here.
Nice.
But yeah, so the main thing that I did was institute a regular direct mail program. So the 3 pillars of at the Domestic Institute of our fundraising are major gifts, foundation grants, and then direct mail, both physical mail and email. And then obviously there's also reporting built into that. So thing that maybe people don't expect is that there is a busy season for fundraising, which is mid-November through December 31st, because that is when people are feeling the most generous, especially people who have a lot of money, who are going to get a tax write-off if they give their money before the year ends. So they're realizing that they haven't given money that they were intending to give, and now is the time that you want to be asking them for money. So yeah, a lot of what I do is managing the schedule for the major gift officers, and keeping tabs on all the relationships that we have with our major benefactors. So knowing the kinds of programs that they're interested in, making sure that they're on the correct schedule for how frequently they should be contacted, knowing like we should write them an email because they support our chapter at Yale and we just had a great event at Yale. And also keeping track of how much they have given us historically, how much we would like to them to give us this year, when we need to ask them for that money in order for them to be on track. Then writing the letters that we send to the benefactors. We do 5 mailings a year. So getting all of the materials together for that, and then doing all the acknowledgements of those gifts and processing all of those gifts. And then for grants, we only do a couple of times a year, but you have the whole grant application that you fill out, and then you have a reporting structure to whatever the foundation is. So it really depends on the time of year of what specifically I'm working on, but if there's a good rhythm because we space those things. So usually, like, there's a big push for fundraising at the end of the year, and then there's a big push on reporting right at the beginning of the year. There's another big push at the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th. So like mid-May to end of June is also another big push, and then another push of reporting in July, and it kind of toggles like that throughout the year.
Okay. That is very helpful to understand all of that. I don't think I knew most of that. So you do a lot of administrative work, meaning, like you said, you're managing calendars, you're managing some people and managing schedules, and then you do a lot of writing. So I know you and I had that conversation before about the writing that you do. So can you tell the students a little bit about how writing is a huge piece of what is done in certain development roles, I would say?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that in basically any advancement position that you could have, one of the things that they're going to want, one of the things that most people want, unless I guess you're going to be like a computer programmer or something like that, are communication skills. And I'll say, like written and verbal communication skills, whichever is more important to them. So the verbal communication skills are or oral communication skills are really important if you do something like Thomas does, and written communication skills are really important if you have a job more like what I do, because how much money you raise is dependent on how well you write, and that I think something that was interesting for me to learn, and that was interesting in I don't know how relevant this is to the other. I guess that I also find it relevant. So I majored in history at Christendom, but I also took a lot of philosophy and literature classes. And one thing that really struck me that I don't know how many of you are upperclassmen at this point, but I think that we talk a lot of it at Christendom about the core curriculum and majors not really mattering that much, and then you just choose something, but mostly it's just the core curriculum. And the thing that really struck me when I was a junior and senior is how each major really trains you in a particular discipline, right? And the discipline, especially the discipline of writing, varies between, philosophy papers are different than literature papers are different than history papers. And having experience writing each different kind showed me that the sort of, I guess, the genre of the writing and development writing is a distinct genre, and like a direct mail is a different genre of writing than when you are applying to a foundation. And so having the ability to write well and express yourself well in the written word is something I definitely credit to my Christendom education, because of how much writing there is that a lot of other students actually don't really do. And also the fact that I wasn't trained in just one thing, but because of the core curriculum and because of the electives that I took, I was able to further develop this understanding of the different genres of writing, which really helped me with the ability to kind of put on a particular lens or particular genre when I was writing, particular types of pieces for my work with the Smith Institute.
Awesome. Thank you. So that writing is valuable. All those papers you have due this week and whatnot, I promise it's all worth it. All right, so
They are.
So Thomas, let's go back to kind of your day-to-day, since it does vary, I think, a little bit.
So if Katie is the eye in the sky, I'm the little ant that's running around and she's directing. So it's super helpful to have somebody like Katie who sees the big picture, because my day-to-day can be very different day-to-day, which I love. It's always something to learn. That's another thing I love about my job. I never feel like I mastered it. There's many ways to do my job as there are people. And so the two big kind of ways my day can go is, one, I'm on the road and I'm going and visiting people who have already gifted money to the school, and I'm building a relationship with them. I'm learning why they love Christendom, how they want to be involved with the college going forward, and just really listening and talking to them. And I really would say my time at Christendom and the variety of thought and just kind of the course of history gave me a really, it was easy for me to relate to people of many different backgrounds because of the kind of wide variety of subjects and disciplines we study here at Christendom. So that's kind of one way my day could go. It's on the road, visiting, driving to people's homes, meeting them at a coffee shop, or sometimes hosting them here. I know you probably see me walking around with benefactors here on campus, and if I can, just say if they're here on campus, they already love the school. You're not going to mess anything up. If you come up and say hello, they're here because they love you all, and they're literally blown away every time they come to campus. They're like, I cannot believe like students are like this still, and they're just so impressed. So please come up and say hello. They're such sweet people. So yes, on the road or here on campus visiting with people. And other days, sometimes I'm just doing some paperwork, kind of, making notes of conversations I had, next steps, emails. What's funny, my emails are not like a paper. It's actually way more conversational. So you're not allowed to use a ... in a paper, but oftentimes I will write an email kind of like a conversation, and it's just kind of more warm. It comes across that way via email. Just the type of people I'm working with, they seem to be more receptive to that. So kind of those are the two big kind of splits in the day. And I will say, like, there are days I get into the car after driving, and like, sure, it could be like a little grueling sometimes. The first year especially, I did, I think, 40,000 miles of driving in 9 months, which is a lot. The first year is the toughest, but then after that, it gets so much easier. But there are times I get out of meetings with people, and I literally just get in the car. I'm like, this is so awesome. I cannot believe I get paid to do this. This is so fun, because these people are really amazing people. And so that's what I really enjoy. Like, I would say sometimes, like, it's hard when I'm doing paperwork, but when I'm out and meeting people, it's amazing.
Yeah, there's always that balance. And
Yeah,
you
exactly.
got to find a job where you can find that in, that you're enjoying it while you're there, and there are some tough parts. I remember actually I interviewed for a job, and they asked me what my least favorite part of the job description was.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know how to answer this. And I felt very caught off guard, but it's like, really and truly, in every job, you're going to have pieces of it that aren't like the thing that gets you excited. But when you have at least half of it that you are just so excited to do it, then it makes all the difference. So, yeah.
We'll say.
All right. So actually, as you were talking, I was kind of thinking, how hard is it to ask these people for money? And are you actually doing that when you're there with them? Because, and Katie, you mentioned the word strategy. There's a whole, fundraising strategy that goes behind things. So talk to them about maybe skills they might need to ask people for money and to be in this situation.
I would say the biggest thing, in specifically with major gifts. So that's a good distinction, actually, because major gifts as distinguished. So major gifts are anything over a certain threshold for organization. Some organizations might be over 1,000. Some organizations might be over 10,000. Some might be over 50,000. So basically, everybody who I work with is, I would say, at a certain level of giving to the college, and they already love the school. So it's not like I'm actually calling people cold calling. So there's a little bit of a difference. There's, I would say, would you say there's 3 segments of fundraising, Katie? Like, there's direct mail, which is, say, 0 to 1,000. And then there's, there's kind of a mid-level, which I'm just saying really roughly is like 1,000 to 10,000. And then major gift is, say, roughly 10,000 up. Would you say that's a pretty good kind of very rough benchmark?
Yeah.
Okay. So usually what I'm working with, or I'm trying to get people to get to, is, the gifting $10,000 over, might be over 5 years, might be over every year. Sometimes they're giving way more than $10,000 a year. And so the level of gosh, relationship and engagement deepens as somebody gifts more money. So somebody who gives, and every gift is important, but somebody who gives $1 a month is going to be probably less connected emotionally with the college than somebody who gives $1,000 a month. And so basically, they're kind of opting into, hey, I want a relationship with Christendom. I really want to be involved with the mission. I really want to know what's going on. I want somebody calling me. I want a relationship with the school. And so people who want that level of relationship are the people who I'm reaching out to. And some people do, and some people don't. And so I'm just trying to figure out, like, who wants that relationship. I don't know what the actual question was. I got caught up.
That's all right. Well, because your job is really the relationship building. So they've already established that they want to give. So you're not having to reach out and ask.
Right. Oh, so yes. Yeah. How many times do I actually ask people for money? I probably could count on less than 2 hands. Probably less than 10 times I've straight out asked somebody for money in almost 3 years of working for the college. Mm-hmm. It is 9 times out of 10, kind of 4 questions. Why do you love Christendom? And like that takes a while. That takes maybe a couple of visits, you know. So why do you love Christendom? What do you want to do at the college is the second question. How will you do it? You know, is it going to be a cash gift? Is it going to be stock gifts? And will you do it? Will you pull the trigger? Will you actually do this? And so if you look at kind of those 4 questions, you're like, okay, this person I'm still discovering why they love the school. And then the last question is kind of just like, okay, I'm ready to make this gift. So I usually don't ask people for money, but I'm asking them why. Like, okay, I know you love Christendom, but why? And so I would say probably the most important skill is just listening. Like listening to people, what they're saying and what they're not saying by what they're saying. And it's kind of just coming back to it. And that's kind of what I love learning about. Just there's so many people with different stories out there. It's fascinating.
Mm-hmm. I told a few people this the other day that just ask somebody else questions. They want to talk about themselves. Mm-hmm. Pretty much anywhere you go, they want to talk about themselves. So think of that. That can be used in kind of any job that you do in the future, whether that's donor relations. That's also another word that's used in this industry, or counseling or administrative work. I mean, just in anything. So being interested in finding that interest in other people. So I think that's great, the listening aspect, because we often don't see that as a skill that you can put on your resume. You can't be like, I'm good at listening, hire me. But really, it does come in handy. And I think if you can explain when you've had to listen well to other people in a certain job or experience, then you can talk about it when you are putting it on your resume in a cover letter or at an interview. So, okay, did we cover all of that? Actually, Katie, I'd love to hear from you about that. Like, what skills do you think are important for the students to have to go into this line of work? Especially, you mentioned the written skills. So you mentioned written skills are important for you versus Thomas's more verbal and oral skills. So, but can you share any other ones?
The thing I was actually thinking of saying is not necessarily a skill, so maybe I'll just freestyle. The spirit of Thomas here. But I think that the most difficult aspect of fundraising. Okay, I'm gonna rewind. Okay. Right now, the position that I used to have, fundraising for the Domestic Institute, I have since moved on, and they're trying to hire somebody new. I contacted like every person that I know in fundraising, and every single one of them said, yeah, we're trying to find somebody too. There is a deficit, like a very serious deficit of people who are working in fundraising and have any kind of experience, because people are intimidated by the job. And I think that the most important thing when you're kind of, going forward and sort of making your way in your career, but especially in something like fundraising, is to be confident, because that, obviously, your confidence will impress other people, but also because you have a reason to be confident, right? And I think that the thing in fundraising that people find the most distasteful is the idea of asking other people for money. In American society, being a charity case is a bad thing, right? Like, maybe you get a scholarship and you've been asked to, like write a letter to the that effect when you get your scholarship or whatever, but there is sort of an instinctive revulsion that Americans have to needing help from other people or of asking people for money. And this is a thing that holds a lot of people back. And I think the thing that a lot of people don't realize about something like a career in advancement is, one, as Thomas was saying, first of all, unless you're a major gift officer, you will actually be asking people for money very infrequently. And even then, it doesn't happen that often because a lot of it is just relationship building. But the major, I guess it's not a skill, but I would say more of a mindset that is really important in fundraising, in doing something in advancement, is to see that my dad once told me, sorry, I have a habit of starting a sentence and deciding I want to use another sentence and then like I'm doing my sentence and so okay.
All right.
I remember my dad telling me when I was a little kid, do something that you love and you will never work a day in your life. And I would say that my experience with the Thomistic Institute, it's not true that you never have days that feel like work, because there are certain days, especially when, the appeal needs to be in before you leave for Thanksgiving, and it's 11 p.m. and it's not done yet, and you would like to go home, but you can't because you are the only person who does the direction. And instead of that, it feels like work, and you would like to go home. But the thing that immediately struck me as different about doing something like fundraising, where the reason that I was in it was because of how much I loved the mission of the place that I worked for. I wasn't doing it because I wanted to do the thing of fundraising. I found a place, I liked the mission that they had, and I had skills that filled a need on their part. Because basically all mission-based organizations need money. If you have any fundraising experience at all, you are like the most valuable person that so many institutions can hire, because they're desperate for people who are willing to raise the money, and they can't do the job without the money. I'm kind of waxing poetic at this point, but I think the thing that you would, so to get back to the mindset, the thing that I think you need, okay, it's not a skill, it's a mindset, is realizing that fundraising is not about asking someone for money. It's about inviting them to be a part of a mission that you love and you think that they will also love to be a part of. You are inviting them to make the kind of impact on the world and on other people's lives that they want to make, right? So if you're fundraising for Christendom College, you are saying, I'm doing this because I believe in an excellent Catholic education and forming men and women to be very well educated, almost like intellectual evangelists who can restore all things in Christ. And I think you want that too. And so I'm inviting you to make this mission possible with me. And that's really the thing that you're doing. The thing, you are not asking them to give you something, right? You are offering them something. You are offering them the chance to do something that matters. And every person wants to do something that matters, right? There really aren't people, unless they have had kind of like life crushing them down for a long time. There aren't people who were made to not care about the world, or who were made to not want to do something great, or who were made to not want to make a difference. It just depends on how they want to make the difference. And the thing that's wonderful about doing something like fundraising is that your whole job is about living your passion and then basically finding other people who are also passionate about the thing that you're passionate about. And when you think about it that way, you understand fundraising and you are made confident in what you are doing, and then it's not hard anymore.
Yeah. Did you have anything to add to that?
No. It is definitely, actually a couple of things. It is definitely a hot job market. I would say we are so immersed here in 4 years of, wanting to work in something that we believe in. And I think that's a challenge sometimes for us when we graduate, because it's either, I'm going straight into one career, or I'm doing something that, maybe I couldn't support a family on. I think you can have a very good career in fundraising. I would say the onus is on you all, and with all the support that we have here, to find a fundraising or a charity that you believe in and that is a good operation, because there's many operations out there. I think we as students and graduates have a perfect skill set for it, because we have personal skills, we have writing skills, and we have oral skills. But you just want to find a good operation that's not just about the money, it's about the mission. Yeah.
Well, and going back to Katie, what you said, it's, yes, you want to find a good operation in that they've got a good mission and that they're working towards that. But you also might happen upon a good operation that is not operating well. So Katie went in there and she, she made changes. And I think oftentimes when you are about to graduate, when you are still in college, you feel like, how can I make a difference? Even Katie, you were kind of saying that, like, where do I get off saying these things and giving these ideas? But you'd be surprised when you get out there what kind of skills you have and how you can use those to improve a place that has been operating for however long. You guys have new ideas and you see things differently and you have new technology that you use that some places don't. So, don't be afraid to get out there and be willing to make a change in some of these places. Okay, so I'm trying to think of kind of where to go next. Well, you both have talked about, obviously there's pieces of the job that are not like the most fun. So tell us a little bit more about a time you have struggled in your job.
I would say the first year was probably the hardest for me. From day one, I knew like it's not a 1 year commitment. It's at least 3 years. You're not seeing the fruit of your labor until at least year 2, if not year 3. I knew it intellectually. Darn it, if it wasn't hard though. Just meeting a bunch of new people, kind of just a whole new. It was really challenging, very much stretching, and a lot of travel. And I just kind of felt a little bit thrown in the deep end, but I had a ton of support. And so I would say that was the most challenging, like probably the first year, maybe the first 9 months, just trying to like wrap my head around like what is development. So I would say that was the most challenging part.
Okay.
And I'm still learning.
You're still learning, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, and Katie, what about you?
I don't know if this is answering the question that you were trying to ask, but I'm thinking about one thing that was really important for me to learn, especially in the first couple years that I was working, was that not batting 1,000 does not mean that you're bad at your job. So thinking of, and this is the other, in addition to a good operation, you should find a job working for people who you think are good people. And because there are some nonprofits, one of which I interviewed at, and it was at the time the only offer that I had, and I met the vice president of their advancement office. I'm like, you're insane, and I think that you guys are out of the world, and I will live with my parents before I will live for you. And like, yeah, basically when we put your job you guys do, which is far better. But being in, I think finding someplace that will be a healthy environment, and you can have kind of experience, like Thomas said, thrown into the deep end, but I wasn't like unsupported. I had the experience of, I want to say it was like the first time I added a spring appeal. And the spring appeal, just to reveal to you all, the Domestic Institute, we haven't found the silver bullet of like what people are motivated by in the spring. It seems that much like you all experienced the spring semester, not a lot motivates you in the spring semester for some reason. The fall semester, everyone's like, let's go. In spring semester, let's go home. Not like that. But I guess I put in all the normal hours and like put together this whole appeal and sent it to all the benefactors and did everything I thought the right way, and it just bombed. It was really not a success. It made a very small amount of money, and I had to report in our staff meeting each week, and then like it was over, and I was like, well, this is the money that we made, which is a lot less than we normally make. And one, it was really tough for me because I put a lot of work into it and I didn't know why it hadn't worked out. And also, I was embarrassed, but I felt like I had done something really bad, because like I hadn't raised the money and like they were depending on me and I was paid to do this. And I was really struck by the way the director responded, because he was like, okay, well, we'll do better next time, and maybe we can you just add to your to-do list kind of, like an after-action review and like research project trying to figure out like what went wrong. And that was it. I was like, oh, okay.
Sure. It's a very supportive Yeah, you're not fired, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a very supportive
I'm not fired,
boss.
and I'm not bad at my job because I'm not like perfect in every way. So I think that was something I struggled with when I first started working, and having a good work environment helped me a lot with that.
I had something to add to that too, Katie, because it's similar for myself. Actually, the first year, like there was not a lot of money that I was bringing in, and I'm so blessed to work. Just the greatest team ever. That the entire advancement team here. I feel so blessed to work with all those people, Paul Jelsovic and David Costanzo, just amazing men. I learned so much from them, but it was kind of a similar situation where like numbers weren't super high, and they're just like, it's okay. Gave me a ton of support. People give to relationships, and like, again, intellectually I got it, but I didn't believe it myself. I was like, yeah, but it isn't about the money, but no, it actually is though, and it took me that first year to realize, gosh, no, it's actually about doing the little things well, building a relationship, and then just having that support from the team of, okay, you're not canned, like, see you later. It was that support all the way through. Similar for me.
And I think the support is really important in a job. And I can tell you, having worked at places where I didn't feel supported in what I was doing, and it was more of you get a slap on the wrist when you don't do something right, and it's not a productive, constructive environment like both of you are kind of talking about. And so it's hard to know that when you go to apply and interview at places. But Katie, you've kind of mentioned you talk to people and see if they're good people. Talk to other people. That's why networking is another reason why networking is so great, because you can get to know people and they can vouch for the company that you might be working for, or they can say, hey, you would be a good fit here because we know our culture and we know you. So again, just another plug for networking. All right, let's talk about a couple other things before we kind of wrap up and allow the students to ask some questions. So Katie, why do you think Christendom students are already well prepared to work in advancement?
Yeah, I think that, so to take this back to personal story time, when I was at Christendom, I was, like rah-rah Christendom all the time, and I thought Christendom was the greatest place in the world. But, deep down in my, little, I guess, standard, like, American consumerist desire to make a lot of money soul, I had this feeling of like, well, I go to an Ivy League school. I went to a school that nobody has heard of, and I am somehow like inferior, or like other people know something that I don't know. And then basically like every year since I have been out of Christendom, I have come to realize more and more how not only am I just as well educated, but how much better educated I am than basically every person I've. And in my job, I spent a lot of time with people who went to Ivy Leagues. I spent a lot of time with people who went to other guide schools, people who went to very impressive colleges. And they might be smarter, or they might have like come up with, learned some very interesting things of their own volition, but they are not as well educated as the education they receive when you are at Christendom. And then it's impressive to people because you had the opportunity to hone those communication skills. So when you are writing a cover letter, like it sounds good. And as a person, I also did hiring for the Domestic Institute, so I've read hundreds of applications. And it seems like it's not that hard in your mind to write a cover letter. And it is for most people. The fact that you're like, oh, well, I just write one page and explain why I want the job. That sets you like far ahead of most people in your like the ability to stand out, to like show that you're polished and communicate yourself while you're intelligent. And I think the other aspect is realizing that this is kind of a roast, but the thing that I realized very quickly when I was working of interacting with people at other organizations was that the overwhelming majority of people that I have ever met and worked with who do not work with me in my office are somewhere between medium to quite bad at their job. And they still get paid. People are like, they were shocked when I started. They're like, oh my gosh, you were so good at your job, you're so professional, you're like so competent, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I'm literally doing the job description. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm just doing my job.
Yes.
But the fact that you have a sense of like, see the job description, discipline, produce, like do the thing I was hired to do. Most people don't do that. And the fact that at Christendom you are internalizing the discipline, like in classes, but then also in whatever other way you could get involved. I think that's another thing that you really have at Christendom. It's very easy to get involved. And speaking of networking, it's much easier to get good jobs that will look impressive on your resume because the fact that it's easier for you to know the people who hire for those jobs, right? Yeah. Because of how small the school is. And so, like, a friend gave me my job on a phone-a-thon. And actually, the first hint that I had of that other really terrible job that I went to interview for was that Luke Tillotson, who used to work in the advancement office where I worked for when I was at the school, knew somebody else who would work there, and he was my reference. So he's like, I gave you a great reference. But, red flag. Maybe you shouldn't take the job. And so, like having people who will look out for you is another great thing. But I think that it's easy to think like, oh, well, I just got the job because somebody knew me. Like, well, they knew you and they knew that you could do the job.
Yeah, certainly.
So you don't have to impress a stranger in order for you can impress somebody that you know and get a good experience from that.
Right.
Yeah, I would so agree with that, Katie. I think even though we're immersed in such goodness here, there's still that screaming voice from the outside world, if you want to call it that, like, hey, you went to this small school, you cannot get this job, whatever it may be. And I do talk to hundreds of people who have been around the block. They've made big money and they've worked in, you name it, they've been there and worked there. And what they see at Christendom is what gives them hope. And so if you're that hope coming out and you're graduating, like, just don't be afraid. I mean, it is, the world is really ripe for your taking, and it is so true. It is so true. Another thing I would say is that I think we're all motivated as Christendom graduates to work with our heart and our head. We want to work in something that we hold dear to our hearts, and we have very high ideals. And I think that's very applicable to a nonprofit a lot of the time. And it also can be a good career too.
Yeah. Okay, a couple things. I wanted to thank you, Katie, for talking about cover letters. And I wanted to kind of plug that in the spring semester, I will be doing a workshop on cover letter writing because I know that you have to do it for Mr. McFadden's EFL in your senior year, but some of you might need one prior to that. So I will do a workshop. It's optional. You can just come and hang out in Killian's, and I will teach you how to write a cover letter and try to take the stress off of you with it. But so many people don't even get any kind of instruction in how to write a cover letter. So Katie, you've probably seen the terrible, terrible, terrible cover letters that just don't make any sense and they're very short, et cetera. So I'm gonna teach you how to write a better one. And then I thank you, Katie, for saying that you have seen people working who are actually not good at their jobs. And that should give you some sense of hope that I promise you can go out and get a great job, and then you will continue to excel and move up in that job when you show your work ethic, your dedication, and your responsibility to just doing the job, like your genuineness of wanting to do the job. There are so many people, so many places that are struggling to hire right now because they have people who don't have a good work ethic, and they literally just won't show up to work. So I promise you, your willingness to show up to work, and you can talk about that in your cover letter, that you're prompt, responsible, you show up on time, you show up exactly when you're supposed to be there, et cetera. That actually does go a long way right now, especially. So just want to plug that in there as well. One last question for you all, and then we'll take some questions from them. But is there anything that we didn't cover that you really were hoping we would talk about?
Just one word of advice is your summers and your breaks are times for getting the experience before you graduate. Like, do internships. I can't stress the importance of those enough. Like, figure out if you like doing it, and then you are ahead of the ball. So just talk to Mrs. Stevens and get those internships. They really helped me. I probably would have tried 3 or 4 years in politics before I hadn't realized it wasn't for me. But I interned for a couple months and was like, oh, definitely not for me. But do intern. We have so many connections as a small school, and they're easily tapped into because we are a small school. So I would definitely plug internships.
Thank you. And Katie?
Yeah, I agree with Thomas. I would say that if you can, you can't all do this, obviously, and for those who are, thumbing up the existence of the phone-a-thon, you're already on the right track. We have a woman who's, like a senior consultant in fundraising who worked at the Bryzick Institute, and she, kind of is like on the inside of the, knowing about all the fundraising in the area. And she knew that I went to Christendom, and then I learned how to do fundraising at Christendom. She's like, Christendom is one of the most successful fundraising operations that Catholic education has going for right now. Like, insane. The campaign that built the chapel and also is raising a lot more money for a lot of other things that are less glamorous. Incredible, like absolutely incredible. It is, speaking of inferiority complex, I'm thinking that like things at Christendom are like not real. I definitely thought that they're real life. This is not real.
It's real.
Yeah.
The advancement office is real. And if you can get a job at the advancement office, you will know what you were doing. Everything basically that I, what is the word I'm looking for? Not instituted.
Implemented.
Implemented.
Yeah.
They're oral communication skills. So
Yeah.
implemented. The first year that I was at the Bryzick Institute are things that Paul Johnson taught me, basically. And they were blown. The men that I worked for were blown away by the stuff that I knew when I was 23 about fundraising. So you can get really good experience. If you can't get experience, if you can't get a job somehow with the advancement office, you should really consider doing. I don't know if you guys still have philanthropy board for the seniors, but philanthropy board would be another really great thing to do. Or there are a couple of nonprofits in town that you could basically, even if you say I'll volunteer like a couple hours a week, and phone experience is daunting, but a lot of people will ask you to get on the phone just to thank their benefactors, and that looks great on your resume. Any kind of phone job. My first job was working for my dad, a franchise called Surf Rub, fire and water restoration, and I had to do the collections calls, which meant that I had to call all the people and say, "You owe us money, give us the money now." When I was like 15. Why I thought that was a good idea, it's completely unclear. But that was how I got my first job at Christendom, was because I had phone experience, and they're like, having experience, even if they can't immediately point to why it's relevant, that people will be impressed by because they think you need to be a confident person to do that. And you can just force yourself to do it, you don't have to feel that confident when you're doing it. You just have to do it, kind of rip off the Band-Aid and then get used to doing it. But it's really impressive to other people, and it's really impressive to employers, and especially if you can do it and then have the person who supervised you in that as your reference and say they did a great job. That is something I would really recommend that you try and get on your resume before you graduate.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. Thank you so much. I did have one other thing that I was going to mention based on what Katie, what you just said. Today, if you are a junior or a senior, you received an email from me about Population Research Institute down the road is looking for interns immediately, and they pay well, and they do all sorts of this kind of work. They're thanking donors, they're writing letters. Some of them are creating the email campaigns, et cetera. So I highly recommend it if you've got a car and you can get there, because it is in person. But that is a worthwhile one that is local and you can get on your resume. So I want to share that. Okay, let's put it out to you all. What questions do you all have? If you've got a question, raise your hand and Aaron will come to you.
My question is more about the line of work that you guys do. What is next for both of you in terms of hierarchical structure for job promotions and just how you want to move on in the company? Like specificity, especially.
Okay. Katie, were you able to hear that?
No, I heard
Okay.
some of it.
Okay, so he's asking what is the next step for you and what's the next level that you can move up to? How does promotion work at in this type of industry and specifically with your position? Thomas, you want to go?
Yeah, that's a great question. What I love about my work is there's never a ceiling, really. There's never a point where I'm like, okay, I'm a master of this job. I think I would actually be bored if I got to that point. And so there's pretty much a limitless amount of growth in my position. There's always more people to meet. There's always more relationships to build. There's always more people out there who want to give thousands, millions of dollars to Christendom or any nonprofit. For myself personally, the flexibility that my job at Christendom has offered me has enabled me to get involved with some other side projects that I've enjoyed doing. I've always had a dream of starting a high school trade school. That's looking a little different now. I'm actually working part-time, just about 6 hours a week at a local high school. So I have the flexibility. After year one at Christendom, have a little bit of extra flexibility. I'm doing that. I love that. Also looking at some other just business ventures. I have that flexibility and that time. So kind of limitless ceiling, but also the time and the abilities to learn more and to get involved with other things that I also love doing too. So a lot of room to grow, I would say.
Yeah. And Katie?
Yeah, so I think, especially in advancement, there are two different ways that you can think about like how you're moving up the ladder. One is within your institution. So maybe you start out as, like advancement, like assistant or something like that, and you are taking notes and, doing handwritten thank yous or whatever. And in my kind of position, I mean, Thomas and I can show a good split of like what advancement positions are really like, because you have more of a management or like written style, and then you have being a gift officer or like someone who focuses on donor relations, like and building relationships with individual donors, which is not something that I really do. And in each of those two ways, either that divide, Thomas has addressed in a certain way, like when you were a gift officer or like in donor relations, there kind of is not, to a certain extent, like there isn't a ceiling because it's all one, right? Like you have this job and it's just like, it is what you make it. Like how good are you at it? How much money, what relationships can you build? How invested can you get them? Like what can you do for the mission? The other side of things, it's a little dependent on how big your organization is. So when I started, I was like at the top because there was no one but me. But I expanded the position a lot while I was there and added a lot more things. I would just, present, like write a memo to the director and say like, I think that we should do this. And be like, okay, go for it, try it out. And so I actually, like I want to say it was 3 years into working at the Statistic Institute, said, I want a promotion. I want a title that matches the fact that I am actually like managing all of our advancement operations right now, and I want like a significant raise. So I want you to create this position, and I want you to give me the position because that's what's happening right now. And the director was like, yeah, that totally makes sense. Go for it.
Good for you.
And as you can, so I guess you can kind of move up the ladder. It depends on how siloed the particular organization's fundraising is. So bigger organizations or just other organizations, some of the stuff that I do might be done by different departments. Like there might be just one department that does the grants. There might be just one department that does the direct mail. There might be one department that, like works with the major gift officers in order to manage the major benefactors. And I kind of do all of the management and strategy, and then grants and direct mail, and acknowledgements and reporting. But the other thing that you can think about is moving up within that organization, or another way of being promoted basically is, okay, you're the director of the development for an organization whose annual revenue is $5 million a year. And so now you can market yourself to get a job at a place whose annual revenue is $20 million a year. And you will be making more money at that organization, almost certainly. And also even if it isn't like a title promotion necessarily, you are continuing to have increased responsibility, right? And that's obviously promotion. Promotion is that like advancing in your career and making more money. But what promotion actually means, like if you're going to be promoted, it's because you're given more responsibility of some kind. So the question is, how can I get better at what I do? How can I be recognized for what I can contribute to this field by being given more responsibility either in my organization or at a different organization? So I think it really depends on what is most important to you. And I think that you can take something small, a mission that you believe in, kind of like the Statistic Institute, we refer to it as sort of like a startup nonprofit, And because when I started, there were only 2 full-time staff, and now I have like 12, I think, and really help to grow your organization in a real advancement kind of way. Or you can pick a place that has a more established kind of fundraising or advancement office structure and kind of like move up the ladder that way, or a one of the two. One thing that's great about working similar, I guess we already said this a little bit with President, one thing that's great about working for a smaller organization is that they tend to be less stratified. So you don't have the same kind of like, well, you are not, 38 like the other people who are here, and so your opinion doesn't matter as much, or whatever. Like, you're there. And if you have an idea, they're going to listen to it. And they're like, all right, well, I'll go for it. So you have a chance to prove yourself.
Okay. Okay. Great question. Up here, we have a few.
Okay, so my question is about how you do your research. Like, how do you know who is compatible with your mission and who is eligible to donate to your cause?
That's a great question. I think that varies depending on the organization. With Christendom, we found there's something called prospecting, where you go and you say, that really rich person has a ton of money, we should go meet them and see if they'll give Christendom a ton of money. 9 times out of 10, actually probably more than 9 times out of 10, they're not bought into the mission, so it's like a wild goose chase. What we found with Christendom is our people are already here, and it's a growing kind of vortex where they tell their friends and their friends and their friends. So most of the people who, they're already opted in, right? Is there like an eye in the sky, so to speak, where you're like looking for people who might be good fits and good matches? Yes. I would say that's less of Christendom's kind of setup, and kind of less what I do in my work is more people have already said they wanted to opt in. And it's kind of up to me to decide, well, how engaged do they want to be? So I don't know if does that answer your question? Okay. Katie, I don't know if you wanted to add more to that.
I think, yeah, it's actually, I was thinking, this once again goes back to our networking theme, that a lot of how you meet people will end up being major benefactors is one, they already give to you. You notice that they give like a sizable gift, and then you do Google research. That's what I do to find out like who they are. Do they have capacity? How will they be given to us? Should we think about trying to get to know them better? Or they're people who like they attended an event, or we went to some place that like benefactors who have the kind of interests that are related to what we do are, and then just talk to people. And subsequent to, if you have a couple of good conversations, gather those people's kind of information and follow up with them, and then see like where it goes.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Other questions? Back up here again. Ryan, we won't forget about you. Promise.
Thank you. Apart from the Christendom education in general, did majoring in philosophy and history help you in like specific ways in advancement?
Katie, did you hear that?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
That's a good question. I'm thinking. I don't know if you have a quick answer, Katie.
Yeah, I would say that, so as I mentioned, it's actually kind of like a tragic story for me, but I graduated with a history major, and I was 3 credits short of both a philosophy minor and a literature minor.
Wow.
One of which was accidental. I found out after the ad drop period had passed when the spring semester of my senior year. So I thought I was graduating with a minor, and then I did not, which is very upsetting. So check your credits, people. But I, from history and literature, there's a lot of writing, and that helps me a lot. Just to, like, first of all, like working with deadlines and have to be like, you have to like make a good argument in order for the paper to be good, right? And I think that my work in philosophy, really like in all the classes, but I think especially philosophy of Christendom, was your ability to think critically and analytically is something that people find impressive, and it helps you, like, for instance, when you're making a pitch, or if you're trying to, like, like logically connect for people. Be like, okay, I need to do this very succinctly because people do not want to read a long, appeal. They are going to actually read possibly a paragraph of this tops. So we need to think of like, how can you communicate a very clear, compelling message in a very small number of words? And I definitely think that occasion at President was helpful with that.
Awesome. All right. Did you have something else to
That's
say?
perfect. Yep.
Okay. You were thinking about it. That's right. I thought you already answered.
Oh, good.
All right. We'll take Ryan's question, and then we'll kind of end there.
Thank you. So my question for you is, Thomas, you mentioned your idea of, possibly starting a high school or trade school for high schoolers, and you've also mentioned how much you've networked and whatnot. If you had the opportunity to, and of course you've developed all these skills through all this administrative work, if you ever wanted to pursue such an ambition again, do you think through networking and other connections you've made, you could accomplish it better?
Absolutely. Just so I'm understanding your question, to go and start my own nonprofit, so to speak, is that your question? Would I be able to do that with the skills? I think absolutely. I think it's something that, it's all, yes, I think the training absolutely overlaps. There's so much that I've learned over the last 2 years. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yes. One more question, apparently. Okay. Just speak loudly right into it.
I was just wondering how you know if this is something that you want to do or not.
Okay.
Like, if it's like a career that you want to do, if you'd be good at it or not.
That's a great question. I would say if you ask yourselves those questions, like, what do I love doing? And if that's a nonprofit, and you can find a nonprofit that you love doing, then that's a good question. If you love flexibility, I'm talking about my, line of fundraising. If you love flexibility, if you love kind of pushing yourself and learning new things, if you love people, I would say that's a great start. If you want every day to be a little different, right? If you don't want there to be like a total grind during work, then I would say it's definitely worth trying an internship and then give it a shot. Yeah. Anything that you would add to that, Katie? I don't know. As far as how do you know that fundraising is for you, or advancement for that matter?
Yeah. Katie, did you hear that?
I broke up a little bit. I heard, how do you know that advancement is for you?
Yeah.
That's it.
Practical question.
Yep.
I think the answer is you never really know what's for you until you try it. So if you think, like, if you are, I knew that I wanted to do something that was very mission-based. I am very mission-motivated. I had a job actually making, like, a quite good amount of money at a winery when I was at Christendom. And I just couldn't stand it because I was like, I don't care if these people drink wine or not. Like, I don't care that it pays me a lot more money than my own stuff. Because I just don't care at all that they drink the wine. Like, I care that people give money to Christendom College because I think Christendom College is the best place in the world, and I want everyone to have the experience that I had. And so I'd much rather spend my time, in the windowless attic of J-League than at this beautiful winery. So I think that, like, if you're very mission motivated, that's one thing. And then I think the other aspect of the job, which is very rewarding, is you can, I guess, there's this actually kind of corny but great book. I don't know if you've heard it before, but I read it with the kind of as like a workplace development when I was working in the President Advancement office, called "What Color Is Your Parachute?" And this book is in like 25 editions. It's a little bit sappy. Just so you like brace yourself for prose. You're not going to necessarily enjoy it. I found it penitential. But there's very
Lenten
useful,
reading.
Very useful. I found to be very useful exercises that the author takes you through, and basically he goes through this, and like weird. There's, just so you know, I highly recommend that you read the book. be warned in advance. There's a part where you have to like draw flower and then like write different things about yourself on each of the petals. Okay, it's really weird.
It's that kind of book, yeah.
But it's basically like everyone was made by God to have an impact on the world, but the kind of impact that you are made to have on the world can be discerned. It's very optimistic. Can be discerned by what your desires are, right? Like, what do you feel is the most meaningful? And then he gives you suggestions basically as you go through these different steps and see like, okay, I am the kind of person that, like, what makes me feel like I'm having the biggest impact is to impact the greatest number of people. And whether or not I actually see those people doesn't matter to me. He's like, okay, well, you should, be like the president of the United States. Or you can say, like, the thing that really matters to me is to have interactions with individual people, and I look in their eyes and see I have helped them. And in that case, it's like, okay, maybe you should be a missionary. A parent also, like, that's a really good one for having, like, a one-on-one relationship where you see you making a difference. But he gives you, like, career suggestions, and he helps you kind of go through these ideas of, like, okay, I want to do something with my life. What is the impact? What kind of impact am I going to find the most satisfying to make? What are my favorite skills to use? And then from there, after kind of doing that, I want to say discernment, but sort of like cataloging, what kind of career paths could I take with this? And I think with advancement, if you're the kind of person, depending on where you work, for me it's a little bit different because the TI, I also worked in events, so I worked with our students. But a lot of times if you are in advancement, you are the champion of the mission and you're making the mission happen, but you're in the background, right? You are not the one who's in the classroom with the students teaching them. You are not the one who is, digging ditches or building churches in, Haiti or any of those things. You're the person who is in office. You don't necessarily even see the beneficiaries of what you're doing. And there's a distance between you and the mission, which a lot of people can find very rewarding because you can see also, like, it's not all about the money, but it's kind of about the money. And we would have, when I was working in the Christendom Phonathon, you would have your, we had like some sort of like prize, but you would flag for the manager when you had raised your salary for the semester. And you were like, I just paid for myself, and now all of the rest of the semester is me raising money just like for the school, and I'm not getting anything out of it.
Nice.
We would calculate how much it made a semester. Okay.
Nice.
But that's something that's very satisfying to me is like, I raised my own salary. I ran this appeal, and I raised my salary, and I raised your salary, and I raised this guy's salary. And I just paid for this conference, and I paid for this, and I paid for this, and I paid for this. And so you have a sense of the impact. It just is the question of like your distance from the mission and what kind of impact is going to be the one that you find the most fulfilling, basically because of, how God made you, basically, and the thing that he wants for you. So
Two things
that's kind
to
of like a vague way of answering the question.
Yeah.
But there you go.
Two last things to piggyback off of that while we're on the subject of book recommendations. Guys, this will rock the way you look at learning and work. It's called Why the Rich Keep Getting Richer. Why the Rich Keep Getting Richer. It completely changed the way I looked at both work and it. Talk to me afterwards if you want the book. It is fantastic. And then the other thing is just don't settle for working in something that you don't believe in. Like you are so valued out there. Don't settle for anything less than what you love doing.
Okay, and one more thing. I have at least 2 copies of What Color is Your Parachute in my office. So if you would like to come borrow one and do the fun flower activities, it could be very useful. So yes, thank you for your plug of that book. I've actually never read it, but it sits on my shelf and I see it. I might have the 2016 version, so I'm sure there's already a 2021 version. But yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, both of you, for so much advice that you've given them and just topics to think about. I appreciate learning so much from you all so that when students come in, those who couldn't be here tonight, and they ask me questions, I will feel more confident sharing about what fundraising, development, advancement does. So I feel a lot smarter having talked to you all. Thank you so much.